invited people to put their name and where they're from, and if you know the traditional territory from which you're from, into the chat. That would be amazing. And we're going to have a time of learning and collaborating in some small groups. And I'm going to try to figure out how to put the schedule in here. So Eve, without further ado, we are also recording this call, just so you know. So hopefully that's okay with everyone. So Eve, I turn it over to you with gratitude and thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hello, friends. I am so excited to be with you today. Yes, I have been in hospitality a very, very long time, and I've been in the retreat center world for about 6.5 years at this point. So for many of you, I am a newcomer in retreat centers, and I am looking forward to ways I can learn from you. But today we're going to talk about hospitality and the ways in which the hospitality industry impacts what we do at retreat centers and the way that all of us in retreat centers might be doing hospitality and guest services differently and share best practices and learn from each other. When we were thinking about how to frame this session, we were talking about ways in which some people are incredibly good at the programmatic mission-based work of our retreat centers and may feel less secure in their operations, facilities, hospitality sides of the practice. So if that is something that resonates with you, you are amongst many friends here, and I'm hoping some of the things I can offer today help you feel really grounded in the great work you're already doing and how it matches some of the skills you have. And if any of them are new, maybe a safe place to practice. So we're going to start with setting the table. You'll see I'm using each of these sections in hospitality terms. I totally just couldn't hold back. And part of hospitality that we do at Adama is really around loving warmth. And you'll see that throughout this whole piece. So we're going to start with setting the table. Michael, can you jump in and put the PowerPoint up for me, please? Great, thank you so much. So as you can see, I am the Chief Operating Officer of Adama. Adama is the nation's largest faith-based environmental organization. Across the country, we do 4 things: leadership development, climate action, Jewish environmental education, and the part that I spend all my time living, breathing, thinking about, immersive retreating. We have 2 retreat centers, one in Connecticut, Isabella Freedman, and one in Maryland, Pearlstone. So what I do as COO is maintain the whole hospitality division of our national organization across many offices and locations, but primarily in our 2 retreat centers. Next slide. And since we're talking about hospitality, I have some really big questions that, rather than me speaking just to you at you, I'd rather us all talk about together, which are what does hospitality include? What does it include for you and the worlds you're in and the people you serve? What about guest service? What does that include? And what's the difference between the two? Sometimes they're used in exchange for each other, and sometimes they're very, very different. So next slide. What you can see is that for my experience, and not only have I had the pleasure of being part of RCC for all of my time at Adama, but I also help run a Jewish version of this called Retreat Jewish that elevates the platform of Jewish retreating across America. And what I've learned from my Jewish counterparts is that sometimes the words are mixed up. Guest services or hospitality could be the people. Oh, go talk to guest services, they'll help you. Or hospitality is the division that takes care of that. So it can also be the department. Go to hospitality, or go to our front office, or go to guest services. It can also be a location. Lost and Found is located at hospitality or guest services. It can also be those people that solve problems, those people that make experience, and the people that are really focused on operations. But for me, hospitality is a philosophy. And the services, guest services, retreat services, facility services, hospitality services, culinary services, are the operations that turn that philosophy into reality. Next slide. So for setting the table, what do those terms mean for all of you? What amenities do you offer? What hospitality staff do you have? How do you divide up your hospitality departments? Do you call it guest services or retreat services or hospitality services, like housekeeping and culinary and the people who set up meeting spaces? Are those all different departments or are those all one person? We're going to jump into breakouts right now, get to know each other, and talk about really important things that are the principles of how you run hospitality or guest services in your own retreat centers. And then we'll come back again and talk through those. So let's spend a couple minutes in these breakout groups, introduce ourselves, and talk about the differences between hospitality and guest services and what we provide. We think we'll give you about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so for those. And then we should all come back and have a much deeper conversation and a group discussion about where does that mean and learn. Does anybody want to say anything as the whole group before we break apart? Like, boy, Eve, you've lost me already? I'm seeing a lot of no's. Okay, great. Well, then let's get into smaller groups. Let's get to know each other and let's talk about guest services, hospitality, and what we provide. We'll see you back here in about 20 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully, those are some fruitful and interesting conversations. And I'm going to turn it back over to Eve for the next little section here.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I hope you had a chance to talk a bit in your small groups, and we'd love to report back out to each other and have a deeper conversation about, so what is hospitality for you? What is guest services? And what are you currently offering? Is there a group who had somebody voluntold that they're the speaker of the group who wants to like raise their hand and say, yep, it was me, and I'm happy to report out? Is there anybody like that who can start us off?
I think we nominated Keith.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's mean.
Sounds
Like I
like a
was in,
surprise to Keith.
yeah.
I'm happy to do it, Keith. I just
All
wanted
right.
to see
Thank
the
you, Scott.
expression on your face.
I
It wa-
like it. I like
the
it. I
joke
like
was
the
worth it.
saucy.
So we talked about the hospitality, but then we also talked a lot about each of our own situations and where we're coming from and how resources is a big issue. We have people that have outsourced several aspects of their business. And thus, that means we lose control and we have to constantly retrain. We have volunteers that you're constantly bringing in that are of different quality, different skills, different capabilities. So I think a big component of this whole thing was how do we control the things that are constantly changing to give a consistent experience? And that goes across every department. The caterers that bring in food versus not having a kitchen, the housekeeping, different people every time, volunteers greeting different people every time. So that's our big issue. Fair enough, Keith?
Thank you. Does that sound like what you all talked about? That is right in the pocket. A really interesting tension. How about another group?
I can share for our group. We were talking about few different things about what hospitality means to each center. And I think a couple of things that stood out was how the hospitality needs to start with how the staff are treating each other and interacting with one another. And then the hospitality towards the guests is going to be authentic because you're already practicing it every day with one another. So that was kind of a theme between our centers. And then another thing that we were talking about was groups with various diversity and how hospitality might be defined very differently with different groups. And, what can we do to, be more aware of the types of groups that are coming, what they might need, what their culture is, and making sure that we're maybe even preparing our staff, to certain groups that are coming, so they can be hospitable in the right kinds of ways, not just in the ways that is common and familiar to us.
I love that. I know on this call alone, Saralyn, there are people who only do their own type of retreating, and there are people who do rentals, and then there's people who do hybrids or models where they're sponsored retreating. So even in the categories of the types of retreats and groups, we have diversity on this call of how people even consider who's coming for sure. So thank you for that. And we had another group as well.
I can speak for us because the other two are not on video, so I can have a face for our group. It was lovely, and I also found out both of them are going to be at the retreat coming up in November, so I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. But we talked about hospitality, I guess, in terms of, we shared our different, looks like we all three have kind of different models, like you said, Eve, about how we do things. And we spent a lot of time talking about culinary and how hospitality comes through with pleasing our guests, and how you can have the same meal and have guests, this is the best meal I've ever had. And some guys like, no, I am not satisfied at all. So a lot of that, like talk about how to support the culinary and our missions that we have for feeding folks, because we know they don't come for the food, but food is a big part of the grounding and support while they're at retreats. And then we ended our conversation a little bit about talking about hospitality in terms of how we handle cancellations and how that works with wanting to keep guests happy and coming back again, but in honoring the situations that they might find themselves in that they need to cancel, but also having to have boundaries, and because we have also expenses and things in people's life. They have they check the box saying I agree to this cancellation, and then they argue at the end about it. And feeling more like we are more happy to help people who don't come at us aggressively about it than the people who do. And so that's kind of where those are the two areas that we talked about.
Amazing. Michael, did we have a fourth group as well?
Yes, there is a fourth group.
I thought so. Is there a brave person who can speak on behalf of that group?
Should we let Holly speak for us? Because I don't think we got to hear from her as much.
Well, we went a little bit off track. We covered a lot of ground. So we didn't focus just on hospitality and guest services, but we talked about marketing and not marketing and lots of different pieces to the puzzle. So I'm gonna if Mandy, Stanley, or Bill want to jump in and add to that. There was, like I said, we covered a lot in 20 minutes, so.
Yeah, we really talked about marketing, kind of went off the rails from the prompt, but marketing in the sense of it not necessarily just being, I will take a small piece from that conversation. Marketing is not being the best word to describe that, but what being a process of clarifying your own value proposition to yourself, your staff, and to the people that you're serving. So in a way, it's an hospitality in this, if I'm going to go out on a limb here, is to some degree being very clear about what you're adding, what you have to offer, what value you have, what you're doing, and being able to say that succinctly and crisply, internally and externally.
Beautifully said. Wow. I hope we all got the recording of that, because we all want a copy. That was beautiful. So let me do a quick reflect back. One of the things I'm hearing is that the term hospitality is vast. So many different components to it. Some of them having to do with our values, our identity, the way we treat each other, the way we set up our examples of our mission, visions, and values. And some of them are operations, like, are we having our own culinary team and our own housekeeping team, or are we outsourcing? Totally different components to it. And then I really want to respect that it's a big, messy, enormous bucket of stuff. My favorite bucket of stuff, but it is. And in my own world, I have teams that do sales, guest services, retreat services. Those are the people that are setting up all of the AV chairs and tables and all the meeting room spaces. The culinary team, hospitality services, that's housekeeping. Managers on duty, they're the people who are running this place. Security, all as different departments, all trying to interact with other divisions like education programs, land stewardship, farmers, right? Totally different areas. So when I think about hospitality, I think about how are we translating our mission into every spoonful? How are we going from the macro to the micro? How are we going from the big vision of the organization to the tiny details in hospitality, like what color tablecloths we're using and what do they say about our identity? So with that in mind, I want to move from what is hospitality to how do we know if we're on the right track? And one of the ways to be able to benchmark our impact, to benchmark, are we even in the right communication of our guests' expectations versus what we have as capacity, can be really found in some of the benchmarking. So Michael, if you would put back up the PowerPoint, I will open up that section of this presentation. Next slide. Okay, so we're up to the meal here. When we talk about hospitality, so much of it is jargony. So I really want to get into some of the specifics here and help everybody make sure we're all using the same terms. Because even with something like occupancy, I want to know, are we talking RevPAB, RevPAR, bed nights, capacity, inventory, like all different terms here. So let's get to some of the terms I use and make sure we all use them. And each time I do them, what I'd love is for people to raise their hands or put their hand icon on if you do this thing at your retreat center. Okay, next slide. So when you think about metrics, we are pretty all on board and used to talking about the financial health ones, right? So I bet you know about your operating margins. Hands up, yeah. Your liquidity, yeah. Earned versus contributions for your revenue ratios, yeah, also good. Year over year or year to dates, projections as you're changing your financial forecasting, nodding, hands up, great, okay. Some of the KPIs are hospitality specific. KPIs, by the way, are key performance indicators. They're letting you track what you're going to consider success within your retreat center, not only for financial performance or improvement to show your board or your finance committee or your funders or your staff, or how effective and efficient your operational measures are, but there are also some specific ones related to how you are doing in your retreat hospitality sales and in your guest satisfaction scores. Next slide. Here is a sample of a hospitality KPI dashboard that could be used for you to be able to track year over year, year to date, deltas of some of the KPIs that could be in hospitality. Bed nights is one example. You'll see I'll talk about RevPAB and RevPAR as well. Bed nights are how many guests are in, for this example, heads in beds. I think somebody's asking for it to be bigger. Thank you. Heads in beds over multiple nights against the available nights that you have people in at your retreat center, as opposed to 365, because not everybody uses all of them. Dollars per bed night, your average group size, how many overnight groups versus day. For this dashboard, this retreat center's COGS get much more favorable when their groups are over 75 people. So how many year over year are growing to larger size ones? What's the average stay length per person per bed night? And what's the average contract size? And then you can use a dashboard like this to be able to show and track your data with your chief finance officer, your finance committee, your board, your own hospitality teams. Hands back up. Who has hospitality KPI dashboards? Nobody. One. Okay. So something you might want to start to consider, what data do you want to collect and how you're collecting it? Next slide. I've been using some terms and I want to make sure we are all using them the same way. So I've mentioned RevPAR. RevPAR is a standard in the hospitality industry, not specific to retreat centers. Does anybody here use RevPAR? That assumes that you're tracking based on the number of rooms, not the number of beds, not the number of nights, not the number of guests. To do it, you multiply your average daily room rate by its occupancy rate. But you can also do it by dividing your total room revenue by the total number of rooms available over the period being measured. RevPAR is the standard in the hospitality industry across the country. Each week you can check against the weekly rates in the country. As of the end of September 28 through October 4 in the United States, occupancy rate was 63.7. It went down 3%. And the RevPAR was $102.37 of revenue per available room. So just some standard industry levels, and you can check what you want to use for your data collection. Somebody asking about these slides, we're going to give them out to everybody. Yep, you'll all get them. So that's RevPAR. Anybody using RevPAR? I'll tell you, I don't think it's a perfect model for retreat centers. What is Scott? Scott, what's your question? Where do I get the RevPAR number?
Yeah, you see that's available publicly. I was wondering if there's to go to a hospitality, where do you get it?
Yeah, I follow str.com.
Okay,
But you
thanks.
can follow many different trackers that are tracking up and down across the country, across internationally, that have different trackers, but I like str.coms.
And that's typically from hotels and such.
Only, it doesn't include retreat centers. And so
Okay.
like last year when there were mega tours, like Beyonce on tour, all of the cities in which she was at,
The
the RevPAR,
Swifties.
you can see the significant changes over time.
Okay. So it's okay.
str.com.
There's nothing retreat specific because, you know, a lot of retreat centers don't have weekly during the week versus a hotel, which is a nightly. So it's kind of maybe the RCC should start their own. Okay, thanks.
Sure. I can tell you my retreat centers use similar dashboards. I know some don't, but we have year-round availability, including midweek and all 12 months, and that's not typical in lots of retreat centers. Okay, so the next KPI you could use, next slide, is RevPAB as opposed to RevPAR. The difference here is a lot of retreat centers sell by bed, and there's multiple occupants in a room or dormitory style or something like that, in which you only have in your inventory, let's say 30 rooms or 50 rooms, but you can have up to 178 people. So you might want to do it by RevPAB. In RevPAB, which is basically average daily room rate by the number of beds, but I think you shouldn't do it by 100% of your beds, because it is unlikely in a post-pandemic reality that every head is in every bed. And to be able to say my maximum occupancy is 127, but know that you really can only sleep 90 is a disservice to your data. So I think a realistic measure shouldn't be your complete and total occupancy. You should come up with the number that works for you of what much more likely your maximum occupancy is. 85, 90%, maybe an average. Is there anybody here who uses RevPAB? No. Interesting. Okay. Next slide. So how do you know if it's working? If you're talking about social media and marketing, and I know the team that veered off hospitality and focused on marketing, you want to make sure that you have a KPI that's working for you, and you'd be looking at click-through rates. If you want to look at your life cycle of a contract, particularly how much you're capturing from inquiry to the contract phase, you want to be looking at your conversion rates. That also will help you with, am I marketing to the right audience, because are the highest percentage of my inquiries qualified, good, strong leads to be able to convert into contracts. And it'll help you look at sales speed. So is anybody here using conversion rate data or click-through data to be able to know about their marketing or about the quality of their sales? Look at all of you. Great. Then there's RevPAR and RevPAB I talked about. These are all 4 industry ways for you to be able to have a quick snapshot of how you're doing. Next slide. But what are your guests saying? Standardized guest surveys are the opposite side. They're their chance to have a standardized, and I would argue you probably want to have, by and large, one guest survey, although you may have a couple additional questions for specific retreats, but a standardized guest survey that has standard information about experience. And in it, the most important question in the hospitality industry is the one that says, how likely are you to recommend this Ford car dealership to your friends and family, or this Maytag washer? That question you've gotten your whole life. That's the NPS. That's Net Promoter Score. How likely are you to recommend my retreat center to your family and friends? Anybody here use NPS? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I will be real brief about this one. To make sure. I recommend that everybody have QR codes of your guest survey all around your public spaces and on your dining room tables and in your in-room materials. And if you have your contact information of all of your attendees, it goes out as an email. My personal experience with emailing it out to just group leaders is they either have their own survey or they don't get it to all of your guests. So very hard to do that if you don't do it while they're with you. NPS scores are done this way. My whole life, I thought things were pretty good as I expected, and I gave them 8s. And I didn't know 8 was a passive score. Basically, 7s and 8s don't count. Most of these start at 1, but some start at 0. 0 to 6 or 1 to 6 are all considered detractors. They're all bringing down your score. Only 9s and 10s are promoters. And the way you do the math is you subtract the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters to get your NPS score. And I would encourage each of your retreat centers to have your frontline, your guest services, your hospitality team all know what your NPS scores goal is for the year and how they're playing a role in getting there. One secret to hospitality is if you set all of your expectations up correctly, this is what you can expect of our rooms, whether we make our beds or not, whether our food is farm to table or commercial, whether you're going to be peeling potatoes or having your feet rubbed. All of that leads up to getting an 8. By industry standards, to get a 9 or a 10, you want there to be an interaction that exceeds expectations. And the most likely way to get that is to have a small stumble or something not happen exactly how they expected or go right or something to go off script. And to have a trained team to know how to respond in that moment that exceeds a guest's expectations. I'm going to pause for a second and see if anybody has any comments on that. There's a lot of nodding, and I know that I'm giving you like the world as Eve knows it language. Anybody have comments on that guest experience moment?
I don't from my retreat center, but I worked with a local group that hosted an international sports thing. And on the last day in Cincinnati, we had a tornado warning, so we had to move indoors. We have one of the few indoor facilities that were large enough to host this, and it was available, and it made us look really, really good to be able to say, okay, we're going over to wall soccer. See you there. Instead of just, oh, sorry, we can't host our final event. Could we
Amazing.
build
Perfect
in
example.
some problems to me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Anybody who have any questions or comments about other things that they've done that have exceeded expectations, radical or unrealistic or amazing hospitality moments, or or other pieces about benchmarking before we move on?
Yeah, I'll say that here at the Alex Haley Farm, we have a tradition of setting low expectations for folks. We call ourselves a farm, and people expect to come to the smells of farms and the sounds of farms, but in fact, we have none of that. So we set some low expectations for folks, and then they get here and they're enthused and amazed with it. And so that does set us up for some of those 9s and 10s. Yeah.
Well done. Makes a lot of sense to me, and it is counterintuitive to how we think we want to market and promote ourselves in order to get enough of the guests in for the revenue, because we're about to go into the hard discussions of how you paying the bill for all of this. Okay, let's move to the next slide. All right, how are we doing that? How are we managing hospitality costs? For lots and lots and lots of retreat centers, the highest expense is payroll. And the highest group of people to pay are in hospitality. And over the last couple of years since COVID, the cost in the hospitality industry for hourly employees and salary employees has dramatically changed. But you know what hasn't changed necessarily? Our rates to meet that new expense. So lots of us are struggling. Next slide. And if I'm missing questions, I see there's a question or two. Let me jump in. How do you get people to complete surveys? I would say emailing them 2 days after you have a great intent, but by and large, you've missed your moment. Either way to get people to fill out your surveys is while they're still at your retreat center. Other folks on the call have a good answer for that?
At Five Oaks, we used to offer a quarterly draw for those that submitted a survey to get a one-night stay in our Hermitage, which is a nice peaceful place. And so really got people into filling that out.
Smart.
And I think Eve hit on it already. She said on the dining room tables, in the common spaces, in their bedrooms. At our retreat center, we like to put them on the seat in front of you at the airport shuttle. So there you are sitting on the shuttle going back to the airport, and there's a QR code asking you for an evaluation. You've got 40 minutes to look at that QR code, then people are going to fill it out during that trip back to the airport.
Gotcha. And Scott had a question about data. I think the COLA against hospitality sector within each state might have the data for you. I certainly have pulled the data industry-wide and by the states where my retreat centers are to see, for my experience, is an enormous jump in what hospitality industry pay is from pre-pandemic to current reality, for sure. My hunch is we might want to make a few of these slides a little bigger too, if you can. Michael, I must have done them too small. So the two hospitality expenses one should be focusing on are your payroll and labor and your COGS. Lots and lots of people use COG numbers. It's an important metric in your financial statements should have a COGS line, but what people put into COGS aren't all the same. The reason it's so important is it's an easy, quick way to be able to have a group of expenses subtracted from revenue to be able to come up with a quick gross profit line. And so that payroll plus COGS is a really quick way to look at expenses, but they're not necessarily the same for all of us. So I've said here's a couple of them: food and beverage, kitchen equipment, guest serving supplies, especially if you do compostables. Sometimes people throw contract employees into the COGS line so that it is separate and not included with total staffing lines and expenses, and your own staff, your payroll and labor are separate. Anybody here on the call do their COGS differently and want to volunteer how they look at what their costs of goods sold are?
We're new and we're just building this all out.
Okay. One of the mostly rely on your P&L. So it's a place you can put into, depending in your P&L, what you're going to put in your COGS section of your P&L for your retreat center. The biggest part of your COGS, for my experience, is food. And when you think about your menu engineering, not only your labor side to be able to serve food, but the cost of currently procuring food, you should know your food cost percentage. My retreat centers, we try to run under a 24%. Is there anybody here who has another number they want to throw out?
does that 24% include the payroll costs for producing just the cost of food?
Correct.
Yeah, so at Five Oaks, we did 33% food cost, 33% staffing cost, and then 33% profit.
Thank you.
So you're just strictly talking about the cost of the ingredients of food, not the building or the utilities or the
Those are
insurance.
exactly, Mandy. Part of the reason to have COGS is that those lines, utility lines, payroll lines, are separated out, and you have a COGS, cost of goods sold, against revenue, so that you can build those out into your budgets as percentages of revenue, not flat numbers. Like Michael was saying, 33% of revenue is going to go to this. And then your executive chef, if you have procurement teams, if you have culinary directors, if you have cooks, whoever's purchasing, purchases within the percentage that is in the budget based on the revenue coming in. And they would know for each of the groups, here is the revenue, here's what my percentage can be to go towards food alone. So you have nimble fiscal managers on your team. Cost of labor has increased 30% since 2019, and that's just wages, says Scott in Seven Oaks. And food's cost increased so much too, says Eve in the chat. Exactly right. So really important to be able to look at. Why don't we pause from the PowerPoint, although there's much more we can talk about, but why don't we pause for a second and just talk about how are we managing right now in this reality with this level of expenses and our revenues? This is really frustrating for a lot of retreat centers.
But can I go back a little bit? Are you, so you're just putting labor in one big bucket, or are you separating out labor for like food and housekeeping and back office? Because I think if you separate it out a little bit, I mean, 24% is one number, which is great. But then if you added in the cost of the building and the utilities and the labor for food, then you can start to see like, okay, are we breaking even with food, or are we like, maybe we're overstaffing there, even if we're doing well with the food product. Same way with housekeeping, you know, or back office, you can start to see where you might have like a little overspending.
Great point. And yes, some people do that for sure. In their P&L, payroll is all one line, but it's a roll up. When you can pull it down by budget, every one of those are separate, and you can add them in against building operations, against what all your deliverables are, including food. For some retreat centers, you can't open the kitchen unless you have $7,500 minimum a day, because when you average in the 5 people it takes to run the kitchen and the electricity costs and the people setting up the meeting space, it's not profitable. So they use their guaranteed minimums against their expense side plus profit. Great questions and comments. Other one?
How do you account for food costs being higher if you're trying to buy local, buy organic? Is that 24%? Like, so we try not to buy from, Cisco or Unify. We try and buy from local places, which I'm sure other people do as well. Is there a way of kind of comparing those costs to other people who also have kind of an environmental approach?
Absolutely. And there's some interesting numbers in the farm to table movement about whether that actually necessarily costs more to be local, organic, pay a reasonable wage within your community or not. Not all of the components are necessarily more expensive. Heavy kale, for example, and 70% plant protein-based menu engineering is far less expensive than animal-based proteins. So there are workarounds to be within a sustainable or environmental or a mission-based model for food cost. And there's a number of different ones to look at how you can get there. But I have seen a retreat center or two that on their rental contracts has a line of an additional cost to cover the difference. And so their group leaders see that as an intentional separate line, not baked in. Scott, you had a question or a comment?
I was just going to say probably geography plays a part because we just sent our kitchen chef manager to the Piedmont Environmental Council had a big, I guess, event bringing all the local producers together. And there's actually a co-op where all the producers that are local put everything into it and we can just buy directly. And we've actually seen our costs go down once we shifted off US Foods and the others. So, and then there's some ways of working with them that we're going to work with to try and set up our kind of retreat schedule and our demands for food with their production and see how we can align. It'll take some work, but we really see it can be a true benefit.
Carolyn.
I wanted to say that we put a real emphasis this last year on sustainability in our food department. So in Connecticut, we have a thing called a green lodging certification that you can do with the state. And we realized we're certified, but one of the areas we were lacking in really was food service. So we focused on food sustainability, which brought us to changing our supplier away from US Foods and going with people who could get us more local things. But also, we just put this real emphasis on leftover use and not wasting. All the little things that happen in a kitchen every day, so much food gets wasted, even when you're trying. It's shocking how much you just do that. And we've been able to really make an impact on our food costs this year. So even though prices over the summer in our area had gone up for fruits and vegetables, went up about 35% in our area. They were like 65 in some areas. And our food costs didn't budge. And it was because we were using every little bit of the leftovers, being really creative, being really thoughtful. And so, and it wasn't hard, to get the team's buy-in to this. It is more work for them, but ultimately it's job security for them and really, really help reduce our costs. So if there's any way that people can do that, that's really, really helpful. And the way we're doing it too is like our staff get called to the meal after the guests eat. And so we don't technically call those leftovers, because they're being served at the same time, they're not being recreated into something else. Then whatever's left is considered the leftover, and we use it for whatever, soups, salad dressings, all sorts of creative stuff.
Amazing. Sometimes in the industry, that's called minimizing food waste. And part of menu engineering is how little food waste, and just composting it isn't the answer. How many times you can continue to use something and produce it into soups, stews, frozen, just continue to reuse in your menu engineering is a big, big part of how people are managing their food cost percentages. So you're right on the money, and have a lot of other people backing you on that. There was some hands up. Liz, was it you? Yeah.
Yeah, I know this isn't an option for everyone, but during COVID, when we shut down our retreat center, the woman who was the director of operations said, well, we have this cooks and we have the food that we already bought. Can we just cook it up and feed the homeless? And they were like, sure, we would love for you to do that. That started a whole ministry called Food for the Soul, which the first month they served 200 meals and now they serve 5,000 meals out of our kitchen. It's still going as a separate ministry. And it is food rescue, and it's a food pantry and soup kitchen. Because of their licensing, they can turn a can of green beans into a green bean casserole and serve it to people. And we technically, even though they're sitting right there in a separate ministry, we contract with them to feed our guests. So, and I don't think our guests, it says it in our food thing, but I don't think a lot of them even realize it's rescued food, which again doesn't mean expired, doesn't mean stale. It's just food that hasn't been sold places, and we have groups, local groups that bring the food to us, 99% of which goes out back into the, into the world to feed people who are really hungry, but the rest is used to feed our guests. So it's an option. And we're working a lot now. The new thing with them is the food waste. We do compost, but they're working to try and reduce waste and reuse within within the kitchen.
Beautiful, beautiful. What a living testament to the ways in which we can help each other with the resources we have. I love that. Some of what you're talking about, some retreat centers have climate action plans, some have food justice plans. They have buy-in by their staff, by their boards, by their guests, and are figure prominently in some decision making. And there seem to be real experts here on the call. I know soon we're going into breakouts again because I've just done a whole lot of front-facing information at you with all these different ways to handle it. And I want to make sure that you have a chance to talk in smaller groups. Thanks for the hearts, Kenna. I love the love. Was there a hand up if somebody wanted to just add value to the whole group before we go into breakouts? Awesome. So, Michael, if you can help us get back into breakouts, I'm happy to have this be more of how you want to dig into so many different directions we've already gone here. Whether you want to be talking about dashboards, KPIs, NPS scores, RevPAR, RevPAB, the increasing costs, COGS. We are now deep into the jargon, people. I'm so excited. So whatever of that you are as passionate about as I am, let's get into small groups and have some time to talk.
Hi, friends. Welcome back.
That one was too quick.
I
It was too
know.
quick.
No, I realized somehow in my agenda making that I took a 90-minute call and made it a 2-hour call, and that this would not, we only technically have 7 minutes left of your time, and Eve has a whole other section. So what we wondered is, do you folks want to stay in a little longer? Or my thought is this: Eve could offer us one more kind of good nugget, and that we may have a Eve 2.0 in the new year, second hospitality community call to kind of go through the second part of which was service standards and training and consistency. So would it be okay if we ask Eve to offer us one more nugget and then a chance for us to sort of wrap up and talk as a group? Is that okay with folks?
I have to head out right at the top of the hour, but if other people want to stay, and if you're offering a recording later, it would be nice to hear that later.
Well, I think
in the
actually we
same
could
boat.
do a nugget and stay in the 7 minutes, but I can't do the whole other section.
Yeah.
So I think I'll do something brief and we'll get you in time. Okay, I hope the small groups were helpful. I'm sorry we're not going to do a report back out because I'd love to learn from all of you. But instead I want to pivot to one of the key things of hospitality, which is, we call it loving warmth. But how are you training your guests to be able to provide, your employees, excuse me, to be able to provide consistent excellence in service? There are many industry standards, and there is one general one that I'll just teach you today. And then it sounds like maybe I'll be back and do a whole session on training. So we can talk about it in the new year. I'd love to. Oh, and you also should come to my retreat centers. We can do it all in person. The one I'm going to do is the 10-5 rule. Anybody here already know the 10-5 rule? No. Fascinating. Okay. You have felt it before, just like NPS, but it is something you actually train staff to do. And you don't just train hospitality. Everybody in your organization is now a part of the 10-5 rule. 10 feet away, when you see a person, you make nonverbal visual contact. So there is no you're at your desk and they walk by. That doesn't exist. Somebody walks out of the bathroom, they're in the hall, you're at the other end of the hall. At 10 feet, there is a recognition of a human being's body in 10 feet space of yours. 5 feet away, you make a verbal acknowledgement of their existence. Morning. Hi. Help you? Welcome. Whatever it is. But you will start to feel 10 feet and 5 feet throughout your entire day in a way that you haven't paid attention to when you train folks to do this. Because the 10-5 rule is so basic, you have felt it. Oh yeah, it's definitely a Disney training too. You have felt it every time you were trying to take your luggage out of the hallway when you left your room and housekeepers were coming in to clean and they look up at their carts and say, hello. And then you walk towards the next one and they go, hello. That's training in place. You can actually interview with specific interview techniques to get to the people who are most likely to do this. I have hash marks at the bottom of my interview papers of how many times people had open body language and made eye contact and smiled during their interviews. And if they don't pass a threshold of how many eye contacts and smiles, I won't hire you, even if your resume is incredible. Because I want to train people with the aptitude for the 10-5 rule. I know that's a game changer, but I would recommend starting to look at all the public space, all of the office space, all of the culinary space, everywhere in your building, and start to figure out as you move through it, where's 10 feet, where's 5 feet, so that every time you come across another person, you recognize their existence. It goes a huge way in people seeing themselves belonging in space and feeling a difference from your staff. All right, that's just a teeny nugget. We can do a lot more next time. I'd love some feedback in the last 3 minutes. How was this? Totally sucky, Eve. You only said stuff I've known about. Oh my gosh, there's things I might be able to take home. When are you coming back again? Or meh, maybe this was useful, but I'm not really sure what I got out of it. You check the temperature. How was this for you?
I see a lot of thumbs up, a lot of hearts.
Great.
I just want to say thank you so much, Eve, for taking the time. Lots to think about, and I think lots of little nuggets and lots of fruitful opportunities if you're coming to the retreat in November at Mount Madonna in Santa Cruz, California, to chat about this. And speaking of the retreat, I just wanted you to know Isabel's waving for Mount Madonna. We can't wait to be there. And just to know, like there are a sliding scale. So if you find yourself not able, you think, oh, I can't afford to do that. Please don't let that be a reason. Please reach out to me. Let's figure it out. There's also an option for travel pool or travel assistance. So we want you there. We still have some space. So that's really, really great. I want to make sure that if you haven't had a chance to become a member of the RCC, please take an opportunity to look at that. I'm your guy to talk about membership. I'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with every single one of you about the sliding scale that exists in the membership. So there's that. And lastly, our second tea with Tatiana, which is our HR focused community calls, is going to be on November 4th, which is going to be onboarding best practices. So that's our next community call coming up in a couple of weeks. So friends,
I've dropped my email into the chat. Please take the time to write me back. Set up times when we can meet in person or we can talk virtually. I love to learn from all of you, and I'm so grateful for this time. Thank you so much for coming to this today. And if there's going to be a second one in the beginning of the new year, I hope I see you all again.
thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope to see you all soon here on our mountain.